So joining me now, Trey Gowdy, former House Oversight Committee chairman and now a Fox News contributor. Trey, thank you for being here tonight. Good to see you.
Yes,
was it okay for Rand Paul to mention the name in his tweet today of this? He says he mentioned a name. He says he has no knowledge about whether or not that person is the whistleblower, but he wants to know more about that person's potential involvement in the beginning of all this.
Martha, I like Rand, but I actually think both sides are wrong on this. On the one hand, we make 4-year-olds testify in court. We make women who have been sexually assaulted testify in court. So the notion that if you are a relevant witness, that somehow you can escape being examined and cross-examined, we don't do it for anyone else. So why would we do it for this whistleblower? On the other hand, the reason you don't ever hear me talking about the whistleblower is I don't need him. I've got the transcript. Why do I care what someone who overheard the conversation felt about it, or thought about it, or believed about it? I can read it for myself. So, yes, the whistleblower is relevant, but he's not material. And there are 20 witnesses I think would be more probative than a whistleblower of a transcript that you and I can read for ourselves.
Yeah, but, you know, to the point I was asking about earlier, the question of whether or not whoever this person is pushed open a process that violates the issue of the president's right to have discussions with foreign leaders that are not public, that are not pushed out into the public, even though he knows, and he knew at the time, that there were many people on that call, but they're in that circle for a reason. Are you worried about the precedent that's been set with that, with all of this?
I am. And the remedy for that is to limit the number of people who are on those calls. I mean, there are consequences anytime someone takes unprecedented acts. And if you're going to listen to a conversation between the president and the leader of another country, and then you're going to violate that confidence and tell someone about it, then the president should shrink the number of people who are on the call. That's the remedy for that. Shrink it. Put it down to maybe the Secretary of State and a subject matter expert, but there were what, a dozen people on this call? I mean, do we really need a dozen people to take notes? I'd rather hire a court reporter and then let them read the transcript.
So what do you think happens tomorrow as the senators finish up this process potentially and take it to a vote on witnesses?
You know, Martha, I talked to some of my Senate buddies on the way over tonight. In my truck on the cell phone. I am not convinced that that they don't have the votes for witnesses. I think that is still very much up in the air. And, you know, I think my Republican friends in the Senate are worried that some folks may vote for Bolton, but no one on the other side. And that would be an unmitigated disaster for Republicans. If you're going to have Bolton, then you need to have Hunter Biden. If you're going to have Mulvaney, then you need to have Joe Biden. But this notion that we're going to reward the House, who could have called all of these witnesses but did not, could have subpoenaed them but did not, we're going to reward that with an appearance in the Senate. I would just caution my Republican colleagues in the Senate, do not fall for that. Either have no witnesses or have some parity among the witnesses. I do not think that it is a foregone assurance that they will not vote to have witnesses. Not yet.
Interesting. I mean, you heard Senator Lindsey Graham today sounding pretty confident about all of this. Senator McConnell seemed to have a little bit more of a spring in his step today than he did yesterday on this issue. Are there specific senators that you are getting word are maybe not sure at this point? Collins, Lamar Alexander?
Yeah, I mean, Romney for sure, Murkowski, Collins.
Yeah.
And I think you get a sense from the questions that are being asked. I mean, most of the questions are leading questions that already assume the answer. But there's some senators that are really asking legitimate, direct, open questions, soliciting more information. And to the extent those are Republicans, and I've heard it from Collins, I've heard it from Murkowski, Romney, I think.
Are you referring to there was a question by Collins and Murkowski asking about if the president had discussed the Bidens with regard to the larger issue of corruption and when the first time was that came up, correct? Is that the question that you saw as a red flag?
Well, there was another question that I heard, which is it ever appropriate to investigate a political opponent, and under what circumstances? And I remember Adam kind of took a pass on that, and I didn't think there was a great answer from the president's attorneys. But that's a really good question. What are the circumstances under which it would be appropriate? I mean, the fact that somebody's running against me does not give them immunity from crime. it means I shouldn't investigate them, but it doesn't mean they should not be investigated.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really good question. I think Sinema, probably not on the witness issue, but certainly on the issue of acquittal or conviction, I think Sinema asked a great question last night. And knowing her the way I do, I would not be surprised if she was not genuinely undecided on the verdict, but probably not on witnesses.
You think we're going to see some senators vote to acquit, some Democrat senators?
I think for sure you'll see one in Alabama. If he ever wants to be called senator again, he'll vote to acquit Joe Manchin in West Virginia.
Yeah.
Sinema is her own person, and she's not afraid of anyone, and she's going to vote her conscience, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, and that's part of why I like and respect her so much. I have not talked to her about it. I don't think you're going to lose any Republicans. You may pick up Manchin and Jones in Alabama.
Trey Gowdy, always good to see you. Thank you very much. Good to have you here
Yes, ma'am.
tonight.
Thank you.